If South Carolina's women's basketball program wins their third national title, they could undergo a transformation from a national perception standpoint across all sports.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Gamecock Nation, and welcome back to the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. I'm Antwane, the host of this podcast, and you can find my written work, as always, over on Gamecock Digest, over on Fan Nation. Thank y'all so much for making the Locked On Gamecocks podcast your first listen or watch for your team here today. We are free and available both on YouTube and wherever you get your audio podcasts daily. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as new customers can join today and get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. For those of you that are watching this on YouTube right now, you can tell I'm doing today's show from a hotel here in downtown Cleveland, Ohio. And for those of you listening to this on an audio podcast app, if the audio sounds a little bit funky today, I do apologize for that. I don't have my typical setup, but I do have a microphone, a camera, and my laptop with me, and that's all you really need to run a podcast. So let's get on into today's show. We're going to talk a lot about South Carolina's women's basketball team, how they could undergo the Alabama effect if they win another national title, how they might be slowly replacing UConn in terms of media coverage, and we'll talk about that clip that Juice Wells gave regarding why he left South Carolina. All of that on today's Locked On Gamecocks. If Dawn Staley and the Gamecocks were to win their third national title in program history, it could create an Alabama-esque effect when it comes to how the program is viewed on a national level. Now, when I talk about the Alabama effect, this is what I'm referring to. When Alabama won their second national championship under Nick Saban's watch back in 2011, and heck, when they won their third national title in 2012, all in the span of a 4-year stretch, Alabama began to get brought up in multiple conversations across different sports. Everyone was synonymous with that A logo. Everyone knew, I should say, what Alabama was, who they were, and what they had accomplished. South Carolina's women's basketball program, I'm not going to say it would be to the same degree as Alabama's football program, but if they were to win another national title this year, it would be their second in 3 years. Again, we all know this is their fourth consecutive Final Four appearance. And if they were to claim that national title, I think that it would get to a point where South Carolina as a brand, not just in women's college basketball, but in all of sports, it would become more recognizable from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast. You look at why this could happen now. Women's college basketball is riding a massive wave of momentum right now. You look at the viewership records that are being shattered seemingly every single week in this tournament. You look at how national media members are talking about the NCAA Women's Basketball Tournament, talking about how this tournament has a lot more intrigue than the men's basketball tournament does. You look at former professional athletes, even former NBA stars like a Shaquille O'Neal, stating that the women's game has more intrigue. And sure, a big reason for that intrigue right now is the individual star power that women's basketball is propping up, that ESPN is propping up. And that, of course, starts with Caitlin Clark over at Iowa. But, they say that a rising tide lifts all boats. And so Caitlin Clark getting attention over at Iowa, although some Gamecock fans might not believe this, it is also good for South Carolina that is happening because it's bringing more eyeballs, not just to games that Caitlin Clark is playing in, but to every single game that's taking place in this tournament. And so with this wave of momentum that this sport has right now, if South Carolina can take full advantage, if they can defeat NC State in the Final Four, and then defeat the winner of the UConn-Iowa game in the national championship on Sunday afternoon, South Carolina is no longer going to be just another team. Their women's basketball team, I should say. It's not just going to be another team. And it won't just be centered to women's college basketball as far as recognition is concerned. There will be football fans that will know about South Carolina's women's basketball team. Baseball fans will know about South Carolina's women's basketball team. They might even become part of a Jeopardy question, which I think, honestly, if you get to that point, then you have accomplished a lot in your life. But South Carolina's got a golden opportunity here. They really and truly do. If they can finish this whole thing off, South Carolina, they will join an elite group of programs that, when it comes to coverage, not every team gets. That's the opportunity that lies in front of Dawn Staley and South Carolina in the Final Four this weekend. Now, as far as that elite group, obviously, when we talk about programs that have garnered a lot of national media coverage over the years, you have to include UConn's women's basketball program, and for very good reason. They were once the premier dominant program in the sport of women's college basketball. But that's no longer the case. And I think that there was a move made by ESPN this weekend in terms of their coverage of the Final Four that was quite telling in regards to how people are going to view UConn versus South Carolina in the future. I'll explain that move and what I mean by all that in just a couple moments right here on Locked On Gamecocks. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. The sports calendar is loaded, and FanDuel's making it even more exciting to get in on the action, because right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet on the tourney, Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, and so much more. MLB season has officially gotten underway, and one of the favorites to win it all once again is the Atlanta Braves. FanDuel right now has the Braves odds set at plus 430. So if you think the Braves can finally overcome their divisional series woes that they've had the past couple years, make it back to the World Series, and also win it, might be a good prop bet to put some money on right there. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to this Thursday edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, where we cover your South Carolina Gamecocks every single day. And as always, a big thank you to each and every one of you everydayers who make the Locked On Gamecocks podcast your daily choice for South Carolina sports coverage. It was reported by the Sports Business Journal on Wednesday morning that Aliyah Boston, Gamecock women's basketball legend and current WNBA star, will be a part of ESPN's Final Four coverage this weekend. And in my opinion, I know that Gamecock fans, their initial reaction is going to be they're excited and happy for Aliyah Boston, obviously as someone that is already involved in broadcast journalism. She helps with the Big Ten's coverage throughout their regular season. This is a big deal for her to get this opportunity. But I also think that we could look at this in a different way. We could look at this as UConn is slowly beginning to fade out of the limelight in terms of the media coverage that ESPN provides of women's college basketball. And South Carolina is slowly but surely replacing them. Now, that doesn't happen, of course, overnight. And I'm not saying that South Carolina has overtaken UConn as far as national media coverage is concerned quite yet. I mean, you look at the numbers right now, UConn still holds a solid edge over South Carolina when it comes to just mere search results on Google in women's college basketball. So I'm not saying that the takeover's already happened. But think about it this way. UConn has not won a national championship since 2016. It has been 8 years since Gino Auriemma and the Huskies have hoisted a national title trophy. At the same time, ESPN is still going to roll out their Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird show that they do. Basically, a different way to watch these Final Four games where those two are going to provide some commentary, but also just kind of chop it up and catch up and all the like. And Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi were both former UConn women's basketball stars. Both had illustrious careers in the WNBA. Sue Bird, I believe, has officially retired since then. And Diana Taurasi, she's still playing, but she's probably not too far away from retiring herself. Aliyah Boston, on the other hand, she just finished her college career 1 year ago. She was a rookie this past WNBA season, but as we all can see, Aliyah Boston is one of the biggest rising stars in the WNBA. Won the Rookie of the Year award, was already named a WNBA All-Star this past summer. It's not going to take long before Aliyah Boston is viewed as a top 5 player in the league. And so you look at UConn and how much time has passed since they last won it all. And you look at how the former stars that they've included in their broadcast, Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird. I'm not saying it's going to all just end once Diana Taurasi, say, retires, but maybe once Gino Auriemma retires, which, let's be honest, Gino, I believe, is 70 at this point. How much longer does he have at UConn? I would say at least until Paige Beckers leaves UConn. So I would imagine he comes back next year. But my point here is that the clock is ticking in that regard. So for ESPN, you got to look at the semantics of this whole thing. You can't continue to prop up a program that, let's be honest, hasn't had the success that they're used to over a very long period of time now. We're not talking 1 year. We're not talking 2 years. We're talking now 8 years. And look at what South Carolina's done since UConn's last national title. They've won 2 of their own, going for their 3rd this weekend. They finished the COVID season as the unanimous number 1 ranked team in the country. Likely would have been in the Final Four that year and also could have won the national title that season back in 2020. They've been to 5 Final Fours, even excluding that tournament that never happened that season. South Carolina is the best program in women's college basketball. This is no shock. It's no secret at this point, and we've talked about it already on this show. But now, in my opinion, you're starting to see national media networks like an ESPN, in a way, admit that. It's a smart move to get Aliyah Boston in their crew, because let's just go ahead and be honest. Do y'all think that Aliyah Boston got put on there because of her broadcast journalism background? It certainly helps her, and I'm certainly not saying that, it cannot propel her to that kind of a role. But a big reason why they do have her on there, and probably the main reason, is because she played at South Carolina. She knows Dawn Staley. She knows this program. She literally was just playing women's college basketball 1 year ago. It behooves ESPN to have Aliyah Boston as a part of their crew to be able to relate to Gamecock fans, to talk South Carolina. She'll know about South Carolina better than anybody else on that panel and anyone that's commentating this weekend. So I think that when you see this kind of move being made, it's essentially a signal that UConn is slowly starting to fade out, and South Carolina is slowly starting to take their place. Again, I'm not saying that it has completely happened just yet, but if things continue to trend the way they have for the last 8 years, it is only a matter of time. Who knows? Maybe we'll see an Aliyah Boston, A'ja Wilson collaboration on one of these Final Fours in a few years. I think that would be a lot of fun for Gamecock fans to get to watch those two talk about women's basketball a good amount. Okay, we're going to end today's show by talking a little bit of football, and more so what a former Gamecock player had to say about his time. It was comments that got a lot of backlash from South Carolina's fan base. Was that fair? We're going to talk about all of that in a few moments right here on Locked On Gamecocks. Today's show is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Welcome back to today's edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, where we cover your team every single day in just 30 minutes. Antwane Wells left South Carolina's football program this past December and wound up committing to a fellow SEC counterpart in the Ole Miss Rebels. And obviously, when the move took place, there were a lot of Gamecock fans that were greatly upset. There were a lot of rumblings that came out about Juice Wells' health status, whether or not he could have actually played some of the final games that Carolina were a part of or was a part of at the end of the 2023 regular season. And Juice Wells, really for the first time since he joined Ole Miss's football program, addressed some of that in an interview with Locked On Ole Miss host Stephen Willis. Now, the full interview has not been released yet. That's going to actually come out later tonight. I want to say at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time or Central Daylight Time. Be sure to check that out over on Stephen Willis's Locked On Ole Miss podcast on YouTube, wherever you get your audio podcasts daily. But he did release a clip, Stephen Willis did, of this interview where Juice Wells, again, just brought up why he left South Carolina and transferred to Ole Miss. And he made some interesting comments here. Take a listen to what he had to say.
I wanted to be with a quarterback who's actually experienced in the SEC and can actually, control the offense. And also, I want to win, man. I don't like losing. I'm a competitor.
Okay, so let's break this down piece by piece here. Let's start off with what Juice Wells said at the beginning about being with a quarterback who is actually experienced. I don't have an issue with that particular portion of Juice Wells' comments here because it's understandable. Listen, when Juice Wells made the decision in the 2022 offseason to come back to South Carolina for 2023, we all remember a big reason why that was the case was because of Spencer Rattler coming back. And as we all saw this past fall, Juice Wells had good reason to want to come back and play with Spencer Rattler because Rattler was used a lot more efficiently in Dow Loggains' offensive scheme compared to what Marcus Satterfield did or did not do with him in 2022. And now Lenore Sellers is coming in, and sure, again, we've all talked about the potential he has. He could end up being the greatest quarterback that ever played here. He has never started a college game. That is admittedly a lot of trust that someone like Juice Wells, who has been around the block a few times, has played several years in the college game, would have to put into that quarterback, hoping that they're going to have the same kind of production that they had before he took over the starting role. So I don't have an issue with Juice Wells saying that. And then he followed that up with, wants to play with a quarterback who can actually control the offense. Now, I think the wording could have been a little bit better here from Juice Wells, but again, I don't take that as a dig at Lenore Sellers. A lot of people interpret this as a dig at Lenore Sellers and Spencer Rattler even. And honestly, y'all, I don't quite see why you feel that way. Now, let me explain my positioning here real quick. Reason I don't have an issue with this is because I think that Juice Wells was trying to tie that in with the experience factor. When Dow Loggains came in, basically made it clear that he wants Spencer Rattler's input and feedback on play calls and how the offense is going to be run because he wants this offense to run through his starting quarterback. And with a guy like Spencer Rattler, who was going into, I believe, his 5th season of college football this past fall, you're not going to come in if you're Dow Loggins and tell him, I'm going to be 100% in charge of all the play calls. I don't have any trust in you, having any input. That'd be pretty stupid, right? You're not going to have a job for very long in this sport if that's how you're going to operate. And Spencer Rattler, I think, proved that he had more than earned the right to be involved in play calls this past football season. Now, look at it this way. Lenore Sellers, again, limited snaps last year. Yes, he made a ton of highlight reel type plays when he was out there, but he's never started a game. So that's not to say that Dow Loggins now is all of a sudden going to restrict what Lenore Sellers can and cannot do in his offense. Again, Lenore Sellers is going to have to learn one way or another. And the best way to learn is by sometimes just letting them go. Just let them have some free reign and see what kind of decisions that they make. And understand, they're not always going to make the best decisions. Sometimes Lenore Sellers, listen, y'all, he is going to throw an interception this year. And when it does happen, can't turn around and chastise him for that. He is a redshirt freshman going into this fall. So where I'm going with all that is this. Lenore Sellers, I think, is going to have a say in this offense, but I don't think he's going to have full say. And I think that's to be expected with his current situation. And so I think that's where Juice Wells was going with that comment, can actually control the offense. Because Juice Wells, again, he came back knowing Spencer Rattler was going to be there, and also knowing that Spencer Rattler was going to have probably primary say in how the offense was going to be running that night. Every single Saturday. Don't know that with Lenore Sellers. None of us know that with Lenore Sellers yet. And you're expecting a guy to almost blindly have faith in that. When Juice Wells, his end goal at the end of the day is to get to the NFL. Jackson Dart has been in Lane Kiffin's offense now for 2 years and is going to his 3rd year in that offense. Compare the two situations, y'all. We have to be fair here. You could see why Juice Wells went to Ole Miss in that particular regard. Now, I say all that to get to the final portion of his comments. Also, I want to win. I don't like losing. I'm a competitor. This is where a lot of fans take issue and umbrage with this clip. I have not commented too much on the rumors surrounding Juice Wells sitting out, or being out, I should say, for the majority of the 2023 season. But I am comfortable now saying this. After what I've seen from some other media members that have been doing this a lot longer, or were doing this a lot longer than I have to this point, it seems like that Juice Wells, if he had the chance to come back and play for this team late last season, he could have. It seems like he could have. And then chose not to. The team was losing pretty badly in the middle portion of the 2023 season and clearly needed help. Xavier Legette was the only wide receiver that was doing any damage, quite frankly, in this offense last year. If Juice Wells had been out there, it would have changed the look of that receiving corps drastically. Secondaries would have not been able to just key in on wherever 17 was going. They would have had to respect both outside wide receivers if number 3 was out there with number 17. But alas, he wasn't. So if you're going to say you don't like losing, but yet the team was losing last season and you had a chance to come back, and you decide not to, then those words ring hollow. They absolutely ring hollow. And it's understandable why Gamecock fans would be quite upset with that. So, overall, I know that this is not the sexy conclusion to come to with these kind of comments. I know y'all probably just want to sit here and listen to me or watch me just pound this table with my fist and just say, Juice Wells was wrong. He was 100% wrong. I'm not going to do that here. I don't have a problem with the first half of what he said in this clip. But with what seems to be the case in terms of the circumstances surrounding his injury last year, I do have an issue with the latter portion of his comments. I do. So, I just say this. If you are a fan that has not seen this clip and maybe you're trying to go to X or Instagram or whatever right now, just be smart with what you say. Because, again, remember, a lot of players, a lot of people see these comments. And, sure, it probably doesn't matter now with Juice Wells because he's already pretty much viewed as a cast out or a guy that decided not to play for South Carolina. But it could affect other players and their decisions down the road. So just saying, be mindful of that. With that being said, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. Hope that y'all thoroughly enjoyed today's show. As always, what are y'all's thoughts on the effect another national title could have on South Carolina's women's basketball program? Do you think it could have an Alabama-esque effect on the program? What are your thoughts on Aliyah Boston joining ESPN's Final Four coverage this weekend? Do you think it's a sign that South Carolina is starting to take UConn's spot potentially as far as national media coverage is concerned? And lastly, what were your thoughts and opinions on what Juice Wells had to say in the clip that I played late in the show? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments section if you watched today's show on YouTube, or you can shoot me a direct message on X at @aline_SC if you listen to today's show on an audio podcast app. As always, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and I'll be sure to catch y'all on the next show of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast.